after the Abrahamic covenant. And he's referring to that time at Sinai. So he's making these references to the law, and he's doing it in very specific terms. Likewise, he's also made clear that the law of God is holy and righteous and good. Now, I think you will agree that thus far, through Paul's letter to the Galatians, he has made it undeniably clear that the promises of God are not and never were obtained through the Mosaic covenant. In other words, they were never obtained through keeping the law. But there's still a purpose to the law. The law still has a function, and it has a function for us today in very much the same way that it served a purpose for the Galatians in Paul's day. So this is the question we want to tackle. If redemption is not by the law, then what is the law's significance? And Paul gives us our first answer here in verse 19. It was added because of transgressions. Now, when you think about what the law is and what it does, just based on your daily life, I think most of us would respond, well, the law is given to ensure that sin is restrained. It helps to keep order in society. And that certainly is a purpose of the law, but that's what we call the second use of the law, of God's law. But really what Paul's getting at is what we call the first use of the law. He's saying something quite different here. It's the same thing he communicates in several different ways, and particularly in his letter to the Romans. For example, in Romans chapter 5 and verse 20, Paul writes, "The law was added so that the trespass might increase." That seems rather odd, doesn't it? Now think of it in this way. If we are governing a people, and we add laws upon laws upon laws, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to end up breaking them. As soon as we attempt to keep one, we break another. We're going to come to a point where we finally say, I can't do it. I can't keep up with all of it, right? And probably if you were to take time and sit down and look at just our civil law, if you were to look at federal laws and state laws and county laws and city laws, and you start to figure it all out, what are all the laws, you realize there's probably quite a few of them that you didn't even know about and you couldn't keep up with, and truly, we all break the law, oftentimes without even knowing it. And that's the point. So as the regulations are increased, the scope of how it will be transgressed will increase as well. The more laws there are, the more sin there will be, because sin is any transgression of the law of God. And here's another thing about the law. Because of man's heart, the perversity and depravity of the human heart, the law doesn't just identify what sin is, but it actually stimulates it. So we have two things here. First, the law identifies what sin is. You can think of it in real simple terms. If I don't tell my children, don't eat the cookie on the plate that I set before you, I can't call them guilty for breaking a rule because it wasn't a rule. It was never made a rule. So if someone's going to transgress the law, first we have to identify that it is in fact a law. But here's the second thing. If I tell my children, don't eat the cookie on the plate that I have before you, which is probably a very unjust law, let's be honest. But regardless, they have been given a command. And because they've been given that command, what's going on in their heart? Well, the Bible teaches us. The very fact that I am told, don't do that, makes it all the more enticing. The temptation doesn't subside. The temptation actually increases. When the law forbids, the heart is prompted to transgress it all the more. And Paul tells us this is actually part of the point of the law. And that probably seems strange. And it is a little bit strange, isn't it? But think of your own heart here. What happens when you hear the law? Well, let's think of God's law. Let's think of the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And if you're not trying to justify why that's unimportant or why it doesn't apply to you, or maybe you're coming up with 100 exceptions to this,